Hi guys, welcome to Mending Day. I'm going to show you guys a few ways that I have modified some eBay shirts that have saved me a few dollars. So first up is this lovely pink shirt, and just to show you the label, I'm always looking for high quality materials and shirts and something really unique, and all of this lace looked really unique to me. So, but the issue with this shirt is that the snaps were not quite right. They are misaligned and just in a horrible state. So when I purchased it, I knew I was going to have fixed those. And I also wanted to make the neck lining a little more modest. So those are the things that I am correcting. And the first item is to remove these snaps. I just do not need them, and I don't really see the purpose for them. So we're gonna remove these snaps first. And I'm using this handy dandy little device for removing these for these snaps. It's called a seam ripper, I believe is what I call it. And I found it on Amazon. And the seam ripper that I started learning with was a very thin kind of seam ripper, and it did not hurt my hands when I was young. But as I get older, the seam ripper, it just needs to be a little more ergonomic, so my hands aren't so stressed. So if you are an older sewer like me, I definitely recommend the ergonomic model. I think it'll save your hands a little bit of strain. And I'm using the seam ripper as I can, and also alternating with the small embroidery scissors. So when you're ripping out the threads, you just want to be really careful so you're not snagging the material. And these snaps are not well sewn on at all. The thread should not be that loose. So I feel like the rest of the material is really nice. I mean, the lace is intact. Everything else looks very nice. But they did a horrible job with the snaps. They made the threads way too loose. So when they're loose like that, they're probably going to come off, and the consumer's probably going to need to redo the stitching on the snaps at some point if you keep the snaps on. So this is something to look for when you're purchasing clothing, is just looking at how well things like snaps and buttons are actually affixed. But if you're looking for something on the used market, it's not a big deal if you need to redo the stitching. But in this case, I just do not need the snaps at all. And the question is, how do I fix the snaps that are misaligned? And the conclusion I came to is I don't even need the snaps. I can just sew up the neckline so it's a little more modest to my thinking. And then this top one actually has 2 snaps on it. So quality control is something that was missed when this piece of clothing was constructed. And now we just have all of these seams, loose pieces of thread that I'm going to remove. If you were in a hurry, you know, it probably wouldn't hurt anything if you left them there, but I think it's better just to start fresh and just remove all of them. If you don't remove them, you'll probably encounter them again in the dryer is what I'm thinking. So remove them if you can, but if they're kind of stuck, you might just need to get the scissors and just clip off the loose ends, and just be sure you're just clipping what you need to and not actually clipping your fabric. So just be really careful as you go, and pulling them out is really the best way to go about it if you can. And these snaps have left a indentation. They've kind of modified the shape of the fabric, but beneath it. So you'll see this weird looking kind of circle. So if you were removing snaps on part of the material that's going to be visible, you'd probably need to do something else to cover up that indentation. But in this case, we're just going to be sewing it shut, so nobody is even going to know the difference. It's not even going to be a visible thing that we have to deal with. So easy solution there. So next up is just pinning the material together. I really like using clips, but I think in this case pins are gonna be the best way to go, just to ensure it's really flat and straight. And I'm actually making it so the work that I'm doing isn't gonna alter the shape of the shirt at all. So you kind of have to work with the shirt that's already there, and just make sure you're not doing something that's gonna make it be bunched up or give you creases or something, something that you weren't intending. So I've just marked where I want the opening to be. So I'm just using the other edge of the material as kind of a guide. And I am fighting a little bit with the material because it does have a certain way that it wants to lay. So just work with your material as best you can. And you just want to make sure the shirt is going to be flat and still in the same alignment. So if you find yourself fighting with the shirt, you might have to give way a little bit to what you're trying to do. because I don't want to spend too much time making modifications to the shirt. The only thing I want to do is remove the snaps and adjust the opening just a little bit. Okay, so when I'm sewing this up, I'm gonna try and just sew up those 2 layers on either side of the opening there. So the first stitch I'm actually doing between the layers. I'm trying to hide my my tie off on the thread just to make it a little more invisible. That's one of the pet peeves of mine with clothing is seeing thread and the tie off. I'd just rather not see it. I think clothing is lot prettier when you actually don't see the seams and don't see the thread, because if you don't need to see it, let's just hide it. So that's what I'm doing here. And I am just doing super tiny little stitches. And if you do them small enough, they should not even be seen by the casual observer. So that's what I'm going for, is kind of a invisible kind of stitch. So just be really careful when you're doing these stitches, because it's really easy to snag your skin and end up bleeding. So just be really careful while you're doing this stitching. Just go slow and do not hurt yourself. That's one of my big goals, is don't wound yourself while you're trying to fix up some of your shirts. So I'm just continuing with this super tiny little stitching. And this is the same stitch that I'm going to be using all the way to the top. And as you can see, my thumb is very close to where I'm working. So just be really observant to where your hands are and where the needle is. So don't be in a hurry. Just go really slow as you need to. And if you're an experienced hand sewer, it's going to go a little bit faster, I'm sure. But I always go pretty slow. I don't feel like hand sewing is something that I want to rush through. To me, it's a fun activity. It's fun to sew new garments, and it's fun to recreate some old garments. You know, fixing necklines and such. I think that's kind of a fun thing that we can do. And I did not quite make it all the way to the top with that piece of thread. So when you're tying it off, just try to tie it as tight as you can to the material, so you're not leaving an exposed tie off to catch people's attention. Just try to make it as tight as you can so it's not really visible to most people. Of course, if you're a sewer, you're gonna see it. When you're inspecting a garment, you're gonna see the tie off there. But if somebody's standing at least a foot away, they're not gonna notice. So not a big deal if you didn't make it all the way to the top. And again, to start, I'm actually going between the pieces of fabric to hide that little knot that I want to hide. And then you can just continue with your super tiny little stitches. All right, now we're sewing it all the way to the top. So then the question is, what do you do with the thread that you've got going on there? So I don't want to tie it off in the front. So I'm going to turn over my shirt and just do another stitch. And then I'm actually going to do the tie off under the shirt. Two or three knots is usually what I go for. And we are all done with this shirt, ready to wear. And here's the stitching that we did. Not perfect, and I don't like that knot, but I'm pretty pleased with how that turned out. And this shirt says it's from Kim Rogers. I'm not familiar with that label at all, but it had all these lovely buttons, and then suddenly, oh, no button. So that was the only modification that I'll need to do on this one. And I found a button that's a pretty close match to the other buttons. Not a perfect match, but I figure for the casual observer, they're not gonna really know the difference. So what I did is I unbuttoned the top and the bottom on either side just to give me a little bit of room to work. So make your sewing just as easy as you can. And just like before, we're just going to remove the threads. just to make it a little bit cleaner. And sometimes you can remove it from the front, and sometimes you're working in the back. So just get your seam ripper out just to move those pesky little threads out of the way. And the nice thing when you remove all the threads is you can see the two holes where the button was placed. So that's going to give you a really good placement for your button. So you don't really have that when you're sewing on a button brand new on a new piece of clothing. But this is definitely a perk when you're redoing a button, is you don't have to worry about placement, because it's got to line up very nicely with the holes, and that's a whole other issue. So I started the needle in the back. Again, we're hiding that tie on for the thread. It's just good practice just to get it out of the way, and you just don't need it in your work area. And of course it's prettier if you don't have to look at the place where you started from. So just hold on to that button really tight, just to make sure it's gonna be in the right place. And you'll need to do a couple of stitches just to get it tight, so it's not going to move around on you. If the button starts to move, then you might end up with a button that isn't placed quite right, and then your shirt won't button up right, and it won't look smooth and wonderful the way it should be. And of course, the more stitches you do, the harder it's going to be to get your needle through. So if that happens, just flip it over and see if you can find the correct insertion point. And that usually does the trick. So try not to force it if your needle's not going through. And now we've got a few stitches in, and the button is not moving around, so you can loosen your grip on the button. It's gonna stay put. And it's really up to you at this point how many stitches you want to do. But I usually just keep on sewing until the thread, the needle and thread won't easily go through the holes anymore. And that's usually at the point when I stop. And sorry for the bouncing camera, I just keep on bumping it. I try not to do that, but every once in a while it gets bumped. And I wish I had used a little bit of a darker thread. I was matching up the thread with with the color of the material. But as I started working, I realized the other buttons are using a darker colored thread to match the buttons rather than the color of the shirt. So I wish I had paid a little more attention to that. That's one of the things that you might see that might make people look and wonder why this button is a little bit different than the others. The right shade of thread is certainly something you should look at. And I wish I had examined the other buttons just a little more carefully. But next time I'll pay a little more attention. So just do a couple of knots and just tie it off on the underside of the shirt. Now you're ready to button it back up and check out the work that you do. So the buttoning up is kind of your test. Did I do a good job? did I get the button really in the right place so it lines up and it still looks smooth when you smooth it out there. So it's looking pretty good. So just to take a final look, and it's a pretty good match. Not too much of a visible difference other than the color of the thread. But it's near the bottom of the shirt, so I think that one's going to be a pretty good match. This is the third and final shirt that I'm working on today. It is from C.J. Banks. And I love the wrap design, but I don't like how they adhered it. They just kind of left it loose, and there's just a couple of snaps holding it together. My concern is that, if there was a wind or something, it's gonna blow the two pieces apart, and I just don't want that bit of air in my shirt. Wondering if anybody is seeing something that they shouldn't be seeing. So I decided to go ahead and just remove the snaps and just sew up the shirt completely. And it is a long piece of sewing, but totally worth it if you don't have to worry about people seeing more than they should see. So again, we're taking the seam ripper and we're just gonna remove these snaps. I just don't see the point of the snaps on this clothing at all. I mean, who's gonna remove their snaps? I guess if you wanted to I don't know, reveal some kind of tank top that you've got underneath maybe, but I'm a very modest dresser and I would just have no need for those snaps. They just don't seem to be serving any purpose for me. So let's just remove them and just get them out of the way. And I figure I can always use snaps on a different piece of material. So for a project like this, you could just sew over the snaps, if you didn't want to take the time to remove them. But I figure, I'm not going to use the snaps. They're just going to be buried under the layers of fabric. Let's just remove them so I have them available for another project. So you can use the seam rippers and also some tiny scissors, but just like before, be really careful about what you are cutting. This fabric has some really a loose weave, which the loose weave can be mistaken for thread that you're trying to remove. So just be really careful exactly what you are cutting. And they did a really good job on sewing the snap in. The thread is there's a lot more threading, and it's not coming loose very easily, so I think that's a good sign for the construction of the shirt in general. And this thread just blends in so easily with the shirt. So I'm just going super slow, trying to make sure I'm not going to snag the shirt. And then we're just pulling out the threads. And just be really gentle when you're pulling out the threads. I'm going to try really hard not to damage the shirt during this process. I think if there was any doubt if I was going to be damaging the material, I think I would have just left the snaps where they are. So do keep that in mind. You know, a lot of that's going to depend on the material that you're working with. So the weave is kind of loose, but it's a sturdy material. It's not like a silk or something like that. So if I was working like on a silk or something a little more delicate, you might want to consider just leaving the snaps where they are. If you think removing them is going to leave you with a damaged material, but these are very nice. I removed everything and still looks good on the outside. So I'm just lining up the shirt with the snaps just to make sure it's going to be lined up exactly how it was before. So just smooth it out as you go, and again just line up the holes. So for a lot of this aligning, you're going to be on your own. But if you can start with those holes where the snaps were in, that's going to get you a little bit further on your way. So I feel pretty confident because I could see those holes and just line everything up the way that it was. So do some pinning and also smooth out the material as you go. And try not to pull up the pins when you're smoothing the material. That would just be awesome. And It's one of the things I don't like about those little pins, is they come out so easily. I would rather sew everything with clips, but on projects like this, I think you just need to use the pins just to get everything smooth and just make sure it's you're fixing rather than creating more work for yourself. So you want to make sure that the final product is going to be a smooth shirt that's going to look very similar to how it was made originally. So I don't want to call attention to the work that I'm doing. I want to make sure it's going to be invisible as possible. So just smooth it out as you go. And try to align the pins so you're not going to poke yourself when you're sewing. So do keep that in mind. Try not to injure yourself while you're hand sewing. And we are almost to the end. And again, that one wasn't very straight either. So I just want to make sure there's no sharp objects that I'm going to end up puncturing my skin with. And just one final check to make sure it's smooth and well lined up and not bunching in any place. And I'm gonna start down at the bottom. And I decided just to start about half an inch up. There's some uneven seams that were happening at the bottom there, and I just wanted to make this as smooth as possible. So I decided not to start at the very, very bottom. It's just got some extra layers of material down there that we're not gonna lay straight. So we're just gonna leave them alone. And I'm not too worried about having a few millimeters of open material. I don't think that's going to bother me at all. So much like the first shirt that I mended, this is a very similar process. Just making some very tiny little stitches all along. And this is a lot of material to sew up. So just be patient and do it right and make the stitches as small as you can. And I think of hand sewing as a relaxing activity, so I'm never in a hurry when I'm sewing. Of course, I want to get projects done and enjoy them as soon as possible, but I never feel hurried when I'm hand sewing. So I want to make sure I'm going slow and my stitches are going to look good, and make sure you're not poking your thumb or your fingers with the needle, because my thumb is very close to the needle. So just go slow, and nothing worse than puncturing your thumb with the needle, and then you have to run and get a bandage, quickly, and make sure you're not bleeding over your material. So be patient with yourself and with the material that you're working on. And stitches like this are going to go a lot faster the more times you do them. So you might find that you're going very slow in the beginning, and maybe you speed up after you've been doing it for a few inches. So patience is definitely the key with projects like this. To me, this is not fast fashion. This is something that I'm going to enjoy for many years to come. It's not something that's going to be unfashionable and next year. So I buy things that I like, that have nothing to do with what's trending out there. But I know I will enjoy this shirt, and making it how I want it really is important. So, I might put something like this in my closet, and maybe it has a really wide opening and I'm not comfortable in it, so maybe I don't wear it. So making a few alterations to make it exactly what I want makes it a good choice. You buy some high quality materials and make sure it's going to be comfortable, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that I need quickly. It's going to be something that's going to stand the test of time. So when I'm buying on eBay, what I'm looking for is well-made materials. I really like CJ Banks. I've had good experience with those. Coldwater Creek and Old Navy. Those are brands that I have trusted, and I can make alterations, and the clothing seems to be pretty well made. I'm not going to say perfectly well made, because I'm sure they're fast fashion like everything else. But I've never had an issue with the quality of the material, or how they're made in general. So find some brands that you trust, and then look for some really good deals. The price that I'm looking for is under $20. So I figure this shirt brand new would probably cost me about $50. If it wasn't on sale, just the newest thing on the rack. So under $20 is pretty good. And we've only got a few more inches to go before we reach the top. So I did all these 3 shirts just in one afternoon. It always depends on your skill and how long it takes you to figure out what you want to do with your clothing. So I've got a few years of experience on me, so I've got a pretty good idea how to fix things to my liking. So something like this, if you're an experienced person, might just take an hour. But if you're new to sewing and you need to figure out how to remove, buttons or snaps, or how you can realign something that needs to be adjusted, it might take a little bit longer. So even though these 3 projects I could do in a small afternoon, about an hour or 2, don't let that time kind of stop you. You're at where you're at. So if you are brand new to hand sewing, just be patient. Because I'm experienced, I might get a bunch of shirts, that I want to sew up all at once, and I know I can just do them quickly in one afternoon. But if an afternoon of work is just sewing on a button, just take as much time as you need. I remember when I was little and just learning how to sew on buttons for the first time, I was frustrated, and my button was slipping and not staying put. That's the learning that we have to do. You're not only figuring out how to place a button, or align pieces of fabric. Your hands are still trying to figure out what to do. When you're an experienced sewer, you have a little bit of muscle memory. I know what it feels like when my needle is going through the button, and doing these tiny little stitches. This is just really second nature to me, and it goes pretty quickly. So maybe this is quick for some people, maybe it's slow for others. So just be patient with yourself and the fabric, and just keep it in mind exactly what you're trying to accomplish. I really want to wear this shirt. I want to make sure it's going to be modest, and it's going to be comfortable, and it's gonna look good with my other clothing pieces that I have. So you're not doing fast fashion here. You're doing something that's gonna last you a few years, hopefully 10 if we're lucky. And just keep going. That's kind of the key when you're learning something. Just keep going and keep trying, and take a deep breath if your stitches aren't looking exactly how you want them to look. But just know it's a practice. It's something that takes time. And you might struggle at first, but the more you do it, the easier it's going to get, and it is going to get relaxing. It is going to be something you can do at the end of the day that's going to relax you, and it's going to be enjoyable. So be patient and just wait for that moment that will come, where it's a fun activity, and you're not so much learning as just enjoying the stitches. So I'm just going to keep on sewing as far as I can to the opening there. And just like in the first shirt that I have, we're just going to hide the very the very last few stitches. And just make sure your stitches are snug when you're going to the back side of your shirt, just so they don't come loose. So just do a couple of ties and just make sure they are as snug as you can. And if they're not snug, you're going to find out really quickly. As soon as you wash the shirt and dry it, you're going to be able to see a loose stitch. So not a big deal if that happens, but save yourself a little bit of time and just make them as snug as possible. And I think this turned out reasonably well. The stitches don't look too visible, so keeping them really tiny to me is the key. Thank you guys for coming along on this day of mending. I hope you found the tips helpful, and please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.